Good evening and welcome to the October 13th, 2025 Buildings and Grounds meeting. I'd like to call it to order. And our first item tonight is the approval of minutes. Does anyone have any questions about our minutes? No? Okay. Moving on, we have on our approval items, we have several change orders that net to a $168,739.02 credit. Would you like to give us a rundown?
Sure. Thank you, and good evening, everybody. I won't really hit on the first one, the GC of $30,686. We've talked about this one for the last 2 months. This was the one where we pulled the $15,000 out last month at the last minute. And it will probably come back in November. I will say that $15,000 is currently down to $9,800, so they pulled it out for a reason to go over that. The second one is from last month was the HOP for a credit of $6653.44. Again, that was pulled out. That one's still the same as it was last month, but it was pulled out during the board meeting because of a file error on the agenda. We do have an HOP for HOP is the highway work, by the way. For $8,643.05, and that is tree trimming. And what we were required to do with PennDOT was from the approach on Harris Hill Road, coming westbound or northbound, I guess that would be, towards 23 up from French Creek. There were some pine trees that were hanging over the road that didn't allow folks to see the traffic signal appropriately, so PennDOT had us trim those. There were some trees on Harris Hill Road coming eastbound or southbound that towards 23, that coming up over the hill from Kimberton Meadows on the right-hand side in front of Kimberton Meadows, the housing development there. There were some pine trees that overhung the road and they were concerned about the flashing walking lights for kids crossing the road. And they asked us as well, since we put in walkways there, to help trim them out a little bit. So there was that. And then there was a third location on Ridge Road, Route 23, traveling westbound. Coming around the final bend, there was a pine tree that was hanging out that didn't allow you to see the 15-mile-an-hour school flasher until the last minute. So that tree was taken out. The other three, the credit for $53,840.45, that is for the mechanical. That you'll recall back throughout this process, we've been talking about the allowances that are out there, and each contractor had a set of allowances for their work. And this was the mechanical contractor who has pretty much finished out their work. For a credit of to that allowance, $53,840.45. The electrical contractor, another credit. Again, they're pretty much wrapped up. They're closing out a couple of change orders at this point, but that allowance balance is now released at $130,700, and the plumbing contractor at same thing at $16,874.83. For a total this month of a credit back to the district of $168,739.02.
Okay. Can you give us a sense of just update the board on like when roughly, it's hard to know, but exactly, but roughly when all these credits and final invoices will all be issued?
Sure. So we'll see some more in November. We're wrapping some up there, some final closeout items, and that's why you don't see the general contractor's allowance out yet. You know, they're still closing out some of their things. There will be as well some retainage that goes on. There was a lot of site work that went on with the DEP and so forth. So a lot of that we have to go into spring to make sure, and you won't see change orders every month going up to that, but the whole project, the final closeout for it all will kind of linger a bit until they see how things are germinating in the spring, et cetera. We see what trees or shrubbery that needs to be replaced that gets replaced. The next big piece of this milestone, I'll say, is getting the final write-off of DEP, where they sign off on the site of Act 2. You recall when we first purchased the property because of the arsenic up in the northwest corner, we went through a whole Act 2 process and all of the remediation there. And the final reports are being written now to submit to PDE to wrap that up. So you'll see some things in November. You'll see them start to seriously dwindle off after that. Some of the things with the escrow, I think we started out somewhere around $8 million some odd dollars. The township has in front of them this month a third escrow release of $900 and I want to say it was $68,000 or $86,000, which will take our escrow down to $1.2 million. Some of that will be retained again till spring, till they see things hang on. And the PennDOT escrow that was submitted, we're waiting to submit for the release of that escrow until the final as-built for all the road work are done, which they're in process right now. As soon as that's accomplished, we'll get those to PennDOT, have that released, and at that point, we should be quickly signing off on things.
Very good.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Mr. Gibson, the dedication plaque revision, was that ever discussed again with the provider or?
It is, and they're still working on a credit on that. They are working to talk about getting some credit back on that.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you, Ms. Walker, for that. Moving along to the main event for tonight.
Oh.
The high school feasibility study.
So the high school,
Take it away.
The high school feasibility study, we were tasked with as a district last year to back in the winter to begin put together a phase 1 high school feasibility project. And what that means is to bring in architects, engineers, and so forth to look at what are the options of the high school. And phase 1 are options that aren't you select this option or select that option, is to give you a 30,000-foot view of what the possibilities are. There will be lots of meetings from here to dig into it deeper, to get to a phase 2, et cetera. But as promised, we're here tonight with Schrader Group to present that feasibility study and what are some of the options that are available to us. I want to just, again, preface this is strictly phase 1. We have a long way to go till you get to a new building, as if you recall back to all we went through with Harris Hill, or a renovated building, or however that looks. So with that, I will introduce the Schrader Group, Devin Bradbury and David Schrader, to kind of go through what that, the presentation of that is.
How's that? Okay, good. Thank you for having us. Appreciate being here. And we've actually tried to cut a slideshow that was 290 slides down to this. So I'm very sorry for the brevity of it, but hopefully we get through this quickly. Yeah, good. And maybe the next one even. So you folks have gone through this a number of times. You went through this 5 years ago, led to the project that you undertook and just heard about just now. The middle of this slide is really the portions of work that we conduct. First, we do the facility assessments. Devin is going to explain that to you. In this case, it was kind of a rehashing of what we did 5 years ago. And that sets the foundation for all of the discussions that we have from that point forward. Next, you have had continual enrollment projections updated, so you'll see at least one slide related to that here. And then we go back with each of the building principals and do a capacity analysis against that enrollment projection. So you'll hear each of those. And then finally, this is where we got to a discussion about the high school. In this case, we have 3 options. They're really intended to be order of magnitude options, so you can see some ideas. There are plenty more out there, but this kind of frames it a little bit. So maybe we start with the facility assessments.
Thank you, David. So we started the facility assessments for the entire district back in the spring, and we have this giant packet of information for all of your facilities. We won't go through that until, I believe, January. But we are going to talk about just a couple of the buildings, the middle school and high school in particular, because they impact the assessment of the high school project. How the assessment works is we have a ranking system, which goes from 1, 2, and 3. Items that are identified as high priority get a 1, and those are items that need to be addressed within the next 5 years. Those are generally things in poor condition or maybe life cycle items or life safety items. Ranking number 2 is a fair condition. We can defer some of that work to 6 to 10 years. Sometimes those are finishes that are outdated or systems that are coming up on replacement. And then a 3 is anything that's in good condition, anything that you would be able to defer beyond that 10-year period, so 11 plus. So you're able to get kind of a 10-year master plan out of this assessment in the end of the day. So we'll go ahead and talk through the middle school and the high school in particular. The middle school, you can see the costs up in the upper right-hand corner. We'll get into those a little bit further. Middle school's in really good condition. There's really only a few items that need to be addressed within the first 5 years, and then the rest of it is in that medium priority level, 6 to 10 years, and those are mostly system items, some finish upgrades, flooring, ceiling, paint, casework. The highest priority item and the highest dollar value is going to be that sewer grinder pump. And that's something that's been discussed over the years as part of the middle school. That's something that the borough has recommended moving forward. So that's a large chunk of what you'll see as the priority 1 cost. If you go to the next slide, we can talk about the high school. So again, middle school is in really good condition. High school, a little bit different story. You can see the construction costs. High priority items include some site items like pavement, sidewalks, some drainage items. The bigger thing here is going to be your systems. Everybody probably knows at this point they were replaced in 2000, so we're already at 25 years. If you start anything, usually the systems last 20 to 25 years, so you're right at the end of that life cycle. So a lot of the dollar values within those first 5 years have to do with the systems, particularly the HVAC systems. There's some minor architectural things with masonry repairs and some flooring, but for the most part, the building is doesn't need anything within 5 years besides the systems. Within 6 to 10 years, you'll see a good chunk of items on the next slide here. There again are some systems. The fire alarm needs work. Interior and exterior lighting should be upgraded. There's an emergency distribution system that needs to be brought up to current code. And then the sprinkler system, a suggestion is to make sure the full building is sprinklered. Right now, it's just partial. And then there's some architectural finish upgrades. Again, your building is coming up to 25 years since its last renovation, so some of your systems are going to be, or some of your finishes are going to be needing replacement at that point. So overall, high school's in worse condition. Middle school, this heat map, it's a little small to see on your screen, but we've divided each of the buildings. You can see the high school at the top is in red. The red items are the items that are based on square footage that need the highest dollar amount per square foot. So you can see we have about a $223 per square foot cost to just bring the high school back up to where it needs to be. The rest of your buildings are in pretty good shape. You can see we've broken it down priority 1 and priority 2, and you can see the costs associated with those. And it's pretty clear that if you take the high school and the athletic complex, that is the majority of the cost within those first 5 years that you're going to need to spend money. There's a little bit on Barclay and there's a little bit on Schuylkill, but for the most part, the majority of your highest need are within that high school and athletic complex. So that will take us to the high school feasibility study.
Okay, thanks, Devin. So 2 points to be made here. Just real quickly, Ken, if we go back to that one, the heat map for a second. I remember when Schuylkill was built, so I feel like Schuylkill's a young building, but it was 19 years ago. Okay, and so if Devin does that, Devin and the team do that analysis for a 10-year period of systems starting to need to be replaced, that means that that falls into that yellow category just by virtue of the dollars per square foot. So it's very strange to me to think that that's a building that is in need of retrofit, but the systems will start to need repair over the next 10 years. The other part of this is at the high school level, if you added the priorities 0, 5, 6, 10, you come up with just over $31 million. Keep that in mind. Don't keep the 41 million in mind, because you're going to see that 31 appear shortly. That's construction cost. Okay, now we can move on. Okay, a couple more factors to form that foundation. Enrollment projections, the next slide. I think you've been presented these somewhat regularly. If you go to the bottom of this slide, you can see that while we hope, and you hope, that you start to stabilize student-wise, PEA is still painting the picture that over the next 10 years, you will still have a 415 student increase. And it's spread relatively evenly across all of the buildings. Interestingly, if you look at the high school in the next 5 years, the bottom grade structures increase, the upper grade structures decrease. So there's kind of a bubble that you experience going through the middle school that you cleared way for by creating the additional elementary school that's hitting the high school. So those are the things that you planned for, and those are the things that are taking some reality right now. Next slide. Okay, so now into the capacity analysis. There's quite an extensive slideshow about this. This is the set of questions that everybody asks about. How do you arrive at these capacities? Why are the capacities different than they may have been 5 years ago? And that comes down to program changes within each of the building, new programs added that change the capacity of the building up or down. So that's why you will see some differences in functional use capacity. Keep in mind that in elementary school, a capacity is typically derived from how many classrooms times X number of students. That's literally how that works. The middle school, it's how many classrooms plus a couple of other structured spaces times an 85% number. And then the high school is many, many classrooms throughout because you offer programs in almost every space in that building. And then it's a lower percentage value of that because you have to have the room in a schedule to move around that building and to keep rooms open at certain points to rotate the program. So that's where this all comes from. If we go to the next slide, you also have structured your classroom sizes around a standard. And so what we used was the maximum that's in your class size range. And I know it's important for boards to always say it's a range. You don't try to hit this in every room. But for us to do capacities, the goal will have to be to use that number as a maximum that could appear in a classroom. I'm going to show you a slide in a second that's going to show a percentage of each building that's used. And the strange math is if I have 10 classrooms in an elementary school times 25 students, stay off of this chart for a second, that would say I could get 250 students in that building. No district is ever going to have 100 students in each grade. Right? There's just no way that we can have that. So you've got to allow for the fluctuation in that because when you get to, and I don't know what the math is here, whether it's 10 or 15 students over that number, now we need to reduce the number of students in each room and add a teacher. And so when you say that, you've got to have some kind of percentage that you're using rather than actually trying to fill every classroom up to 100%. So that's where the next slide comes from. So this is the functional use capacity, and given the changes that you've made in number 1 grade structure and number 2 by adding Hares Hill, you can see that given your 2025 and 2026 enrollments in the left-hand column, given the percent recommended capacities shown on the right. With each of the buildings, you currently stay below those recommended capacities. In the elementary schools, you can see even the greatest operating use right now, the ELC and obviously Manavon, we know that that building feels full. And so this is just proving that they're just under the 90%. And so that building, I should say both buildings, but both buildings feel fairly full. The middle school, because you opened up all of those classrooms on the third floor, you now have an excess of capacity in that building, which you'll see is going to serve you well in the future. And then finally, the high school, this is very difficult to say because the building feels full. You can see here we are at 69/70% of operating capacity. You try to operate high schools at 80%. So theoretically, you have 10% capacity there. What the folks behind my right shoulder will tell you is that all of your support spaces feel too tight. And the corridors that run through the building feel too tight. And the cafeteria is too tight. So while you have the number of classroom spaces you need for the meantime, the support functions for that feel too tight and are too tight. And so that's what you're going to hear as a result of the high school. If you project out, and this is the next slide, what we did was we took the highest 10-year projected enrollment. And so if Phoenixville ELC happened to, the Pelk building happened to reach its capacity 6 years from now, that's what you're seeing. You're not seeing all these levels set 10 years out. So you're going to see some highs and lows in the different buildings. And so you're actually seeing the worst case scenario for each building rather than how it feels 10 years out. And so what we would say as a summary to this is that the elementary schools, given your current K2 and 2, or K1, pardon me, and 2.6, that's typo number 1. We have one other typo in here. That says that 2 buildings are over capacity, but as a whole, they're under capacity. So that's going to require a little bit of shifting for the district, but you can accommodate the number of students. The middle school, even in the worst case scenario, it gets to 70%, so you still have quite a bit of capacity. And the high school gets to 72, so again, same story. Plenty of classrooms, not enough support space. So that's what this is essentially saying. In the bottom of that slide actually says core spaces are considered too small for the population. So that was the intent of that. Okay. So we'll continue on. So now you have the basis of the dollars for the middle school and high school, and you have what we know to be the capacity discussions. So we tried 3 different things here, and actually we have probably 10 options, but we narrowed it down to these 3 as discussion points. And they're really meant to be order of magnitude to talk about different ways that you could accommodate the classroom structure in each of these buildings. So we looked at both the high school and the middle school, and certainly there are more permutations here. If you go to the next slide. So one idea was to take the high school and renovate it. And the upper part of this image, you see kind of a purple area and a green area. And those are where the existing auditorium and music rooms were demolished. And instead, what you insert there is a full auditorium with a balcony, like your middle school, and then all of the support music spaces built to today's standards, and then a gymnasium that's a full-size competition gym. The opportunity to build support spaces off of that, and possibly turning your existing fitness room area into team rooms and a trainer space, which could eliminate your existing field house building. And that would take care of that situation. The other thing that you see here is a very large orange square where the current dining space / cafeteria is. Yep, the arrow's on it now. And what that is meant to do is create a common space, a tall and large common space that could become a new entry to the structure and could allow your evening support for the gymnasiums and auditorium. And then the balance of the building is treated with the classrooms as they stand. You probably would do renovations within the building to most likely take lockers out, widen the hallways, and help some of the circulation patterns in the existing building. There's a yellow box in the upper left-hand corner that shows more parking. Yes, I know there's a garden there. And on the right-hand side, near the stadium, there's kind of a new concessions building with bathrooms and so on to support the stadium. In this version, we're not accommodating the renovations to the middle school that Devin pointed out earlier. So if you go to the next slide, I think this just shows you how the building could be added to. There's the gymnasium, there's some of your support spaces, the auditoriums all in purple, and you can see that that sits where the existing auditorium and music areas are. And the next one just shows that there would be a second floor to this to allow for a track that allowed kind of pull-out bleachers and also a balcony area in the auditorium, much like you have in the middle school. So, not meant to be a design, but meant to show you where that square footage could fit on that building.
David, can you just explain to them exactly with the existing classrooms what renovation would be?
Yeah, so, good. So what we assume there, actually, why don't we go to the next slide, if you don't mind. Okay, so this was the thought process behind that. And I know right away we show this number, and that's a giant number. So let's talk about what that means. The demolition in this case is meant to be the demolition of the auditorium area. Then you would add the performing arts area, and you can see these are different dollars per square foot based upon the program type. Then new athletics areas added. We have to add circulation space. We have to add dining area. And then we have the general building renovation, which includes building systems replacement, which is HVAC, lighting, and so on, and finish replacement, cabinetry, and casework replacement. So that's essentially what that is talking about there. Does that help support that? It does have a new stadium, concession, and toilet area. And then because this building would be difficult to renovate without having some kind of swing space, we've allowed a site phasing and a modular number in there as well. Nobody has talked about all of the things that we might do around and through the site. And so, for instance, any renovations to the Purple Pride Parkway or anything that we need to do to Gay Street, that's our responsibility. Some of that would fall on the site cost allowance, plus there are probably some other things that we'll find as we go, including some of your stormwater management and underground things like that. We always add this very arbitrary soft cost allowance of 25% to, and you've seen this over and over again over the years, the number goes anywhere between 25 and 30% depending on the size of the project. That allows for all your fees, all of the things that Mr. Gibson just talked about as part of the project. It allows for new furniture, new technology, and things like that. What this one doesn't include is the middle school renovation costs from the building assessment. Okay?
I think the last thing that I would like you to tell the board is approximately, let's just say we went with this option, which we're nowhere near that.
That's right.
How long would something like this take? I think that's important for them to hear.
Okay, so these, we're involved with projects like this right now, and the phasing is anywhere from 3 to 5 years. These are long projects by the time you move all of the students around the structure.
3 to 5 years once construction begins?
Yes. Yes, and I think you're alluding to the fact that design and permitting takes a year to a year and a half easily, and then you have your procurement and bidding, pardon me. Yes. And there was another thought, and this is where there is a typo or something that wasn't eliminated. The written portion here, move the high school to the middle school. Move the middle school to the high school, connect with a commons, and we'll share more of this. This showed complete renovation of the district administrative structure. That comes out of a prior discussion where we actually thought we had to renovate that to get the square footage to accommodate the high school program. So strangely, what we found instead was, as we finalized this, and just follow me here on the middle school, the existing middle school with the classroom spaces is just shy of the number of rooms that you need for the high school, with the exception of the science program. And so your old science wing in the high school in this version, we don't necessarily cut it off, but we put doors between that wing and this commons that we've created in orange for the middle school, and that becomes the high school structure. And so if you go to the next slide, okay, we've turned this 90 degrees to fit it on here. But ultimately, because the middle school has a pretty high-level gymnasium and a very high-level auditorium, this was why we even had this discussion. And so the idea would be that you would take the cafeteria and all of the spaces around it today, turn those into the technology education STEAM type spaces that you have in the high school, and build that orange component attaching the auditorium to the current science wing. That becomes a student commons, dining space, kitchen, tall space that is somewhat like what you've been seeing in other buildings that are built today. And that becomes the high school. It's kind of a strange thing to think, but you built a building that feels like it could be a high school, and this is the version that changes that to it. And then once you've done that, if you go to the next, this is probably the second and then the third floor, so you can see that we've actually taken each room and each program and relocated it into the middle school building. And when you go to the third floor, you can see we've used all of those classrooms that you've set aside currently. So in your current middle school, that left-hand side is all vacant. It would show up all as white in this plan because you've opened those rooms up when you changed your grade structure, moved sixth grade out. If you go to the next one, so what's interesting about the high school, that red dashed line shows essentially where you would cut off the building to the right to make that a middle school. Now, you maintain the auditorium in this case as it is, probably a pretty good middle school auditorium, and the gym. You would renovate everything, just like we talked about earlier. And we suggest here that perhaps your dining needs to be expanded a little bit as well. So, but otherwise, the building accommodates the need, and all of the white areas are program space that's not needed by the middle school. So an interesting way to look at this. So next slide. And that just shows you second floor. And next slide. So in this version, you actually have to build in, if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, seventh one down, you actually have to do those middle school renovations. So you have to do the $10 million of work in the middle school to pick up all of those renovations to make sure that you don't have to touch it again. We've got at the very top line a conversion of interior spaces in the middle school, the spaces that we know we need to modify, and then the balance of this provides any of the new spaces that you might see in this project to accommodate that. We do think there's some additional small athletic space to be added to support the high school program over at the middle school. That's what that last line, $2,025,000 is. And then the same kinds of site cost allowances and so on. Okay, so remember, option one was, and we don't have to go back to it, option one was tear down some of the program that does not support the high school well, build new spaces for it. Option two was, let's go ahead and use your middle school for a high school and see how we can do that. And then the third one was one of many versions that we came up with for a new high school, if you go to the next one.
Before we jump to that one, can you just say how long would that take? Would it be wildly different than the 3 to 5 years from the first option?
No, it's about the same thing. It may actually be a slight bit less because the construction is slightly less invasive.
And with the site phasing and modulars, which is, I noticed, less expensive on this one, yet you have students from two buildings that will be displaced.
Well, that part's going to be the challenge.
Yeah.
The number of rooms that we need is a little bit less because you have additional room in the middle school already. And so that makes it a little bit easier for us for the number of students. But you're absolutely right. We're still going to have to move students around these two structures back and forth to figure out how to make that happen. And that's a whole nother discussion.
Are the square footages of the two buildings, they're almost the same, aren't they? Aren't they within like 10, 12,000 square feet of each other?
I think I remember the middle school's bigger.
With almost half the kids, right? And then just on these allowances, because there's soft costs, there's site costs, there's alteration allowances. I mean, that's nearly 40% of the overall. Yeah. I mean, how much variance is that? Do you typically see in those?
A lot.
Yeah.
And what will happen as a project gets developed, then you'll start to see those allowances get eaten away and it turns into dollars. So, yes.
Let's let him finish up the program before you.
Well, the third version is the attempt to construct a new high school on the site. And if you go to the next slide here, we sat down with the high school administration and programmed a building that would accommodate any of your future enrollments. And it was something like 345,000 square feet. And we essentially built a 3-story classroom structure and a 2-story support structure for all of the support programs. And that's what you're seeing here. Would it take another configuration? Certainly. It could be any number of configurations. But we located it in several quadrants on the site to see where it might fit best. This was the one that probably had a little less impact on some of the surrounding neighbors. But what it does do is it takes and reorients the playing field, your stadium, to the appropriate north-south orientation. And very strangely, once you turn it that 45 degrees, it actually allows for you to fit it between Gay Street, and I'm sorry, I forget the street directly to the left, that's your driveway. That's how it fits, and then you restructure some of your parking lots around. I will tell you that this version does not have I'm going to say it out loud, a parking deck in it, but another version actually had a 1-story parking deck in it to double your parking in a certain portion of the site. But it's interesting how it kind of works with some of the circulation patterns for buses and cars, works pretty nicely, and then gets some of the playing fields on the site. So I think if you go to the next slide, yeah. So this was done purely on a $1 per square foot basis, and I have to remind everybody, these dollars are in dollars today. So whenever you decide you would want to do a project like this, you would need to escalate it to the midpoint of construction. And I know you're all reeling when you see a number like that. But from an order of magnitude perspective, trying to work on the 2 buildings that you have versus working on this is less than half the price of doing a new building. So that's just the reality of the situation. And I think the last slide's just a comparison slide of the 3 options. Yeah. So.
Timing, same question around timing on the third option. Is it 3 to 5 years?
So the new building would be a 24 to 30 month project, having done a number of similar size. And then you've got all of your demolition and reconstruction. So it's easily a 5-year project.
And then, since you're re-engineering and reconfiguring the entire athletic complex, are the kids, are they not having any home games for?
Very difficult.
For 3 to 5 years?
Yep. You know, a good example of a similar size site in a similar situation is what Upper Merion went through, and they shipped all the programs off-site. Yep.
Okay. Thank you for that thorough analysis. I'm sure we all have plenty of questions. And I have a bunch, but I'm not necessarily sure that we're even at the point where we can get into the weeds. I mean, I'll just give you a bird's eye view of some of the things that I had on my mind were and this may not even be, we touched on this, is, if we're doing the option where we swap the schools, at what point do we do that? Like, how far into the project are we actually deciding to start moving kids from one building to another?
Yeah, when we all thought of this one, this was a pretty strained one from a phasing perspective to figure it all out. You clearly would have to do the construction of the commons first. And because you have the room in the high school, if we found a way to separate the science wing from the balance of the building, we would do so. Then we'd move the students.
Okay.
And it would be at that point that you would start your phasing structure.
Okay.
So build new first, break the building up, and then start your phasing for all the renovations.
Okay.
Remember, your middle school requires very little, actually.
Right. This actually might be more for you, but feel free. Is there, no matter what we do, it's going to be a disruptive thing from a student perspective. And I'm wondering, how do we measure that in terms of, a 3-year-long construction project? How do we measure the academic hit that we might be taking in any of these particular situations, scenarios?
So in my experience from doing this, first of all, and we had in our discussion, David, correct me if I'm wrong, Devin, Dr. Melver, that we felt that the middle school to the high school swap was very disruptive, because now you're not only disrupting one school, but now you're disrupting two. So honestly, when we were talking about that, I think we kind of backed away from, as an administration, we felt that that was, and because the option one and option two, and again, these aren't our only options, but just from a price range, option one and option two are so close in pricing that we felt the next step was, what's the impact on the students and the staff? And that is very disruptive. So you're asking me from a standpoint of, how do we decide that, or when, or what kind of hit will that take on the academic performance? That's hard for me to predict, but any type of educational environment that is disruptive will impact staff and students. Understand that. Even the slightest impact does, a daily routine is daily routine.
I'm just, wondering if we were to look, if we were to look at that as a, from that solely as a decision-making factor, how do we evaluate one? I don't want to necessarily just use anecdotal data to say, well, we think this one will be more strenuous on the academics than another, but I just wondering if there's actually a way to measure that.
Definitely something we can look into. But again, you're impacting middle school and high school with option two. You're impacting high school with option one. So automatically, the impact will have greater impact when you're impacting more students.
Right.
And that's not looking at any data. That's just based on, feedback that, having done this and moving kids, the least amount of students that we can impact at this time, in my opinion, is best.
Okay. My last question, and then I'll let, and this is something that Mr. Gibson and I have discussed when we were going over the presentation earlier last week. When you're looking at the populations of the school in terms of students, how are you measuring is there a way that you're measuring like the flow rate through the hallways versus classroom capacity? Because obviously we don't really have a classroom capacity issue, we have a flow issue. And how do you arrive at a metric that you can measure that this option will, we simply talked about taking the lockers out makes the hallways a foot wider on each, 2 feet wider. So, that obviously would change things.
The answer is no. We don't have a way. Oh, sorry. We don't have a way to do this. That
Okay.
said, one of the organizations we're part of has put on seminars about tracking students and actually following a little GPS movement around the building.
Okay.
So you can really see where the volumes are going. And I know there's a way to do it. So if that's of value to the district, we can look into that further.
I guess building on that, is it too simplistic to suggest, like if you look at 183,000 square feet, or thereabouts, over 1,300 students, right? That's 140 square foot per student. When I look at option 3, you're targeting 232 square feet. So is that a simple enough gauge to say it's obviously there's a problem, it's way too condensed, whether it's the hallways or support areas or the balance of the building?
That would be clue number one. For a high school, we tend to look at, and there are all kinds of metrics for
Right.
this, but we do see between 175 and 215-ish square feet per student. And you could look around our region and pick the buildings that you feel like you've been in and function appropriately, and then we could back that out and tell you. And we know a number of them already and can tell you. Two good examples. I already used Upper Marion as one example. We built that. We built Springfield Delco, Delaware County. And the two buildings are very different metrics in terms of square footage per student. One is 175-ish and the other is 205. And those two differentials, you can feel volume differences in the building. They also built some of the support spaces larger at Upper Marion than they did at Springfield. There are a variety of things that changed the metric, for sure.
I've been in that Upper Marion building. It's a beautiful, beautiful facility. Last one, and then Did we look as part of option 3 around, because it seems fairly disruptive, right, to shift the entire athletic or architecture construct at using the current high school footprint, but just building a third floor? Like, in other words, using that same footprint, just building up.
Yeah, that's a great question that people ask a lot when we talk about renovating. And because of the way the structure was built, you would have to build an exoskeleton around that to support a third floor structure to then carry. The structure in the existing building is not capable of carrying a third floor load.
Okay.
Oh, can I just add one thing to consider as, for the board, as you're thinking about this now? If you're thinking about option 1, which is to renovate the high school, keep in mind, we're talking about space. And keep in mind, the middle school has space. So if we move to that, how do we utilize the space that is open at the middle school to support the high school? So those are things that we have to start thinking about like that. So, because we certainly don't want to keep that beautiful building with the capacity that it's at right now. So if we keep it that way, that's the types of things that we're talking about internally with the administration team is if that is the option, then what do we do at the middle school to support the high school?
Okay. Dart, do you have any questions? No? Dr. Halloran?
Can I
Anyone
ask
else?
one of Dr. Melber? Because he's sitting here, so he's probably anticipating this. How do these numbers make you feel from a financial perspective?
Well, I mean, we had option 4, 5, and 6, but after chasing Dave around the parking lot with a hammer a couple of times, those were deleted. Option 3 is not an option. We sort of threw that on there to show you what that would do. We don't have the debt capacity to build an option 3. So option 3 is off the table. We sort of wanted to show you in case somebody said, hey, what if we just built a whole new building? It's not an option for our district. The other two, right now our debt capacity is just under $100 million. So that's the most we could borrow right now. I think sort of looking at this, as Mr. Gibson said, we're early in these phases. The next phase would be the board sort of making decision to move forward, and then we would, look at hiring a construction management company, bringing on an architect, doing designs. I think the most important part the board needs to realize is if the board says this is something we need to do, because you also could renovate for $30 million and be done with it, and we would be none of these options. Obviously, these options are most likely what the district needs. You are looking at raising taxes to the index for the next 3 to 4 years. There's no way around that. The index is dropping. The amount of money that we can bring in through real estate taxes is dwindling, and we're capped on what we can do that. So it's important for the board to realize that you are going to be raising taxes to the Act 1 index for the next 3, probably 4 years. And we've sort of shown the board over the last couple of years, even with building Hares Hill and with the tax increases we've done, we're still in the lower 1/3 in Chester County of tax rates over the last 5 years. You might say, well, we've raised taxes to build new elementary. How did we stay so low? One of the reasons is a lot of our surrounding partners are building middle schools and high schools and renovating high schools. And, a lot of our neighbors have been raising taxes to the Act 1 index, which 2 years ago was 5.3%. This past year was 4.1. Next year is going to be 3.5. Then it's going to be 3.1. It's going to be under 3%. So the amount of money that we're going to need for this. If we've got some funds coming in and fund balances that we're sitting on that we can spend for this, but you're still looking at probably a $90 million debt borrowing, and the district's going to need to raise somewhere between $4.5 to $5 million in revenue to pay new debt service off for that, and that's how you're going to have to do it. So I think it's important for the board to realize that. I think that needs to be the board's first okay to administration to move forward with the next process, is saying, yes, we realize this is what we're going to have to do, and we need to move forward with it.
And if we kind of touched on this too, but we're really not even we're looking within, this timeframe is 5 years before or 3 to 5 years before we even break ground, if we were to say to go forward and start moving in this direction tonight, which we're not doing that in terms of making a decision, but like, that's where we're.
It is, but if the board wants to do this, the board is going to have to start raising taxes now in order to raise that capacity. And we can show that next month during my end of year presentation or during our January early look. I know at our last I think in February, I sort of showed the board when we looked at our 5-year projection, what our increase in costs were going to be, what the difference was between what we projected tax increase to be and the Act 1 index, and there wasn't a whole lot of room in between. I think between what we projected and what the Act 1 index is over the next 3 years was maybe $3 million, and you're going to need to do $4 to $5 million. So you're correct, but the board would need to start raising taxes to the Act 1 index in the 26, 27 fiscal year. Budget will be starting in a few months. That is going to be the first budget in order to create capacity to pay off the debt for this project.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone have any last questions before
I, just speaking for myself, I would like to see what do we get if we do the significantly less expensive, somewhere in the 30 to 41. I was a little confused about where those numbers sat. What does that look like for our student environment? Could we, for example, not do all the fancy stuff, but increase the hallway width by taking out the lockers? Clearly, there's some other serious facilities needs with the HVAC and those things. But if we go with a cheaper option, what does that look like? What are we sacrificing?
All that the 31 million, and to your point of 41 million, the 41 was with soft costs. So the $31 million in construction only gets you system replacements and upgrades. That's essentially what it is,
So no
finishes and
difference to the
casework.
student experience, it's just.
The rooms are going to feel new, but they're going to be exactly what they were. The corridors are going to feel exactly like they were, and you're going to have new systems that, unfortunately, you need to put in the building to keep the building operating well.
When was the building built again?
Oh, gosh. There you go, 1959.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any kind of rough cost on what taking the lockers out would cost? No? Okay. Guess we can look into that. What's that? Yeah, it's something we can look into.
Just clarity on the lockers, because I know the hallway congestion is something that we talk about a lot. Even if you took out the lockers, what they sit on is a lip. So we're not talking like we could they're not freestanding, they're actually recessed. So were we to take them out, there would still be, because we've actually looked into turning them into bench spaces, turning them into outside, like learning spaces in the hallways. So you wouldn't necessarily, it might feel a little bit wider, but you'd have all of these recesses because they're actually going into the classrooms, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So we're not
Thank you.
gaining 2 feet.
Not really,
hallway
no.
if we take- okay.
No.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it sits on like 2 feet of cinder block.
Okay.
So.
Thanks for the clarification.
I don't want to throw out like totally new options, but I'm going to briefly. Just thinking about what we just spent on Hares Hill, how feasible would it be to consider some sort of like 9th grade center or something like that, where, if we spent for that sort of building, 67 million, and we're looking at like a 1 grade building, how would that be?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. The challenges of the single grade buildings is you have to replicate all of the support spaces, gymnasiums, cafeterias, whether you choose an auditorium or not, but media centers and things like that. So it's a pretty costly building because you're adding those structures to it.
Plus property, we'd have to buy property.
Yes, you have to figure out where you're doing it.
Or like turning this into like a 9th grade center, the DAO, something like that, where it's like a semi-attached.
This essentially accommodates, yes, you could do it north of here, or east of here. But this building accommodates 12 classrooms, just so you know.
We did talk about that. We did talk about the DAO. We did discuss the DAO in discussions as we were trying to figure things out. That was a discussion.
All right. Anything else?
Yeah, I have a question. I know the finances are usually top of the list of when we're considering these options. Completely hypothetically, is there a preferred option of these three or others that were discussed that would give us the best experience for our students, our teachers? I hate to say it, but almost ignoring the money for a second. What would give us the best option for our students and teachers and facilities and all of that? Is there one of those, just so I can sort of orient myself with all the options?
So I'm talking Fantasyland or superintendent? So I give you.
A bit of both.
Fantasyland would be obviously a brand-new building for our kids and our staff. Superintendent is saying absolutely not, we can't afford that. So I don't know of a better way to say that, but, you know, when we say well, first of all, we're not even going to be able to raise enough taxes without going over the Act 1 index, which we would have to get an exception. That is something I don't think we want to go into. That's not something I would ever advise a board to do. And I don't think we're in that position to do that right now. Obviously, if I had the power to do it, I'd love to give our kids and our staff a brand new high school.
So then between option 1 and option 2, just so I revisit a little bit earlier, one of the big things with option 2 is we're disrupting both schools. And even if it's saving, like $6 million in that whole process, it's much more of a disruption and, to be blunt, maybe not worth saving that money in that situation because purely we're disrupting the students and the teachers and administrators and all that, right?
In the discussions that we've had very briefly regarding these options, that was the first thing that came to mind with regard to option 2, is not only are we disrupting the high school students, but now we're impacting the middle school students.
Yeah.
And so that's why, again, looking at option 1 and just initial discussions to present something to the board to say, this is what we're saying. In our brief discussion, that was something that we would say. At this point, I would say option 1 before option 2. And it's clearly because of that.
Yeah.
And in that option 1, as I stated before, there is room in the middle school. So what's the next step? You know, what does that look like of how we can utilize the middle school? And again, there's a number of options that we can look at. But I think, you know, if we were to end up with something like option 1 and we decided, and again, I want to reiterate what Dr. Melber said, because most of you, which is really good, because I've been in the middle of projects where the board changes and members go off and other come on, and there's been a commitment of raising taxes for 4 years, and then you're sitting in front of a board where half of the board is gone, and they said, I didn't make that commitment. So when you make this decision, when Dr. Melber presents these, it has to be solid that we're saying, yes, we're committing, and the year after, when we revisit the budget again, it can't be a discussion, because that gets really scary of how we're going to afford it. So this is a really, really big deal for all of us, and I know you all know that, but this is a huge commitment, and it's going to take us a while to figure out where we're going. But before we even do that, as a board, you need to decide what it is that you're willing to do and ask the community to do, because without that, we can't afford any of this.
I do think that's a good potential next step, is doing some sort of community town hall to see if people come screaming that they don't want that sort of tax increase, or if their support. And I mean, just
One
give them a
follow-up,
chance to-
Dave, is it just on that point around option 1 and 2? So on one side of the ledger, you have the disruption to 2 schools. But is it fair to say that in option 2, you end up with a much more appropriately sized student to space ratio for both schools, right? Because now you have 1,300 kids in a much larger building, much more modern building structure, and you've got 700 in a renovated structure that's sized better? Is that a fair way to look at it?
I think it would pay for us just to go back and compare the square footages of the two, because if we add that athletic structure and performing arts structure, we're adding a pretty good chunk of square footage. And I'm pretty sure we get very close, if not more, than the middle school. So, and to remind everybody, these are real order of magnitude. Nobody sat down and said, I'd like to see this in all these classrooms. We're just giving you a broad brush stroke here. So everybody should keep that in mind.
Right. Anything else? All right, well, thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
All right. Moving along. Lead water testing.
Sure, I just want to give the board an update on where we are with that. If you recall, we did our 5-year lead testing of all of the district buildings. We did come back with a hit list of 8 locations, and we subsequently did some remediation to those. Just last Wednesday, the company was back out, did the retest. We're probably a week away from getting those results. And at that juncture, then we follow on with the go to PDE. We fill out a report there saying, here were the numbers, here's what we did, here's where the follow-up numbers, et cetera. But I just wanted to go over the list of the 8 spots again to kind of give you an indication of where we landed. And this was across all buildings in the district. Barclay had the 4 locations. The first 3 were bubblers in the classroom. Bubblers are the little drinking fountains on the sinks in the classroom. The building A doesn't use them anymore in the first place. We capped them. So the first 3 are no longer an issue, and we're capping actually the rest of them. If you recall, back when we did this in 2020, we put in at that point new water fountains, bottle fillers, et cetera, and filtration systems. And, that's where each year we would talk, bring up at the board each time we did the filter changes, we would talk about the lead testing and have a brief discussion on when we wanted to test again. The nurse's office, that was the sink in the nurse's office. We're waiting to hear back on that one. We replaced all of the equipment on that. Schuylkill Elementary Strings classroom, that had a sink in there that went over the limit, and all of that was replaced, and we're waiting on that. Again, when we talked to the users, the teacher in that room, he's like, honestly, I've never used that sink ever. But the Schuylkill Elementary kitchen, Kitchen 1, this was an interesting one because when we went in there to the kitchen staff, we thought it was one of the tubs they used to do the dishes. It turns out not. It actually is another sink in the kitchen that they don't use, that they use it for filling up I guess you call it a water bath. So if I set food in there and I want it to stay warm, I put warm water in, and that's what the water from that sink was utilized for. But again, all of that was replaced and retested. The Phoenixville, the middle school gym concession sink in the concession stand, that was 1 point over. All of that was replaced. We're waiting on that result. And in the middle school trainer's room, this was the one that came in really high, and one of the reasons it came in really high is because if you recall, when we did that first test, it's not something that anybody uses at the training room. So, and it's behind a cement wall. It's a little hose bib that wasn't flushed before the first test, which is why it came up so high. When we inquired with them, they said they don't ever use it, but I mean, we still shut it down at the same time, replaced everything, and that was something that was retested on Wednesday as well. So we're waiting for the results of those to come back next week. Question?
I'm still very confused as to how we can have high lead readings in the Schuylkill and the middle school when those buildings are less than 20 years old, and my understanding was no lead fixtures, no lead piping was involved.
Well, in middle school, you have to remember the supply lines coming into that, and that's where we got the letters from the borough. The supply water coming in from the borough, they have lead in their pipes. So you have things like the item in the trainer's room where that's just sitting there. It's not being flushed out.
But where's the lead coming from?
I will find out with the follow-up test. I mean, that's the first step is to do that test. We replace the items where they hit. We replace the front end items. We test again. That tells us whether was it in front of the wall or behind the wall. So I can't just give you that answer because I don't know. Nobody does until we test that backwards and figure out where it came from.
Okay, and then just to confirm, are we now on a regular cycle for lead testing?
Yeah, I believe we're going to be on a more rapid cycle. But the initial results from the first draw, as we did last time, they're all posted out on the website. And as we do the PD forms and so forth, those will be put out there as well.
Any other questions? Okay. All right. So moving along to recognition of visitors. Committee respectfully asks the length of comments be respectful to the others, visitors, and the first one is John Mraz.
Good evening, John Mraz, Schuylkill Township. I appreciate the detailed analysis that the Schrader Group did. I've sat through two of the last big renovation projects, or new building projects here, probably more so than any of the members here. During those two times, we were given handouts. And, with 40 or 50 pages on an agenda on the internet for people who want to see this stuff, if you're watching on TV, you can't really decipher any of the information. Not what I could see on TV. So I would think that you would like to have handouts given to the people who do come here if they're interested. I know it's early on. The third option for the new school probably is off the table. But seeing these numbers, I did print out some of the pages I wanted to see. But I think it would be very useful for people to have a handout here, especially when you're talking $100 million, $250 million. This is the next big thing for the school board to do. If I read it correctly, the facility assessment price was a total of $85 million from year 1 to year 10. And based upon the fund balances, would that cover what we would be able to do in the next 10 years? If you take the Phoenixville High School, which shows a $41 million compared to option 1 of $100 million, you're only costing another $60 million probably for building or rebuilding the whole high school. But then you could pick and choose. If you're looking at options, you could add on maybe a new performing arts center for only $16 million. But I think what some of the people have said here, and you did already answer some of my questions, to have another number of meetings for the public. I'm not sure if there's more people here today than in previous meetings. I'm not sure why. I don't know if they knew that this was on. But now that this is public, I hope it's front and center on the PASD website. And there's some comments to be made and where to make those. And when will the next meetings occur? I know you're going to discuss it probably at a board meeting, but special meetings for the future, which is I believe you want to do for sure, have at least a schedule for this. The one other thing is, for the taxpayers, how much did this study cost? It was a very detailed analysis. I knew there was a lot of numbers in there. And what I read in it was that we're not fully capacitated. I think they did mention that. You do have the room for the students here, for the number of students here. Our enrollment hasn't increased tremendously from what I could see from the years past. And I know you get monthly reports from the superintendent. And the future enrollment, I don't believe, shows a huge capacity increase. So I think the public needs to know this and see what again, it's all about taxes. You have a lot of seniors here in this town, in this district. And we've heard this from the other people at budget time. How much can the seniors afford on increases? So I think that's a major, major issue to show that if we do a $100 million project for the high school, how is that going to impact the average citizen here? We're all taxpayers. We want to do great for the students. But having a $16 million center, is that going to be worth it for the taxpayers here? A new facility, have we looked at it if there's big donors out there? I know we talked about, having maybe see some donors, but can we get a naming person here? Just like Temple University or one of the other universities, can they put their name up here on a big facility for athletics? So I do appreciate your time. I know it's not a great job, or it's a thankless job. There's my time limit. But I know even with the committee meetings, we've gone over something like this years past. We sat around a table, discussed things, and Ken knows about this. But it's a more open discussion at these committee meetings, where I hope more people come rather than the board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and I apologize. I'm going to probably butcher this name. Mike Ragazzino? Ragazzino. All right.
And I don't even have to hold it down. All right. My name is Michael Ragazzino. I'm a resident here in the district. I'm also the president of the Renegades Running Club and a parent of a student here at Phoenixville Area Middle School. Since 2018, the Renegades have been running here in town. Every so often at our group runs, we decide to come up to the Phoenixville track and do a track workout. This past week, we got a rather cold email saying that we are no longer welcome to do that, and also indicating that the board is on the verge of deciding a new policy for public access to the track. So I thought Buildings and Grounds might be the best committee to come to. Forgive me if I chose incorrectly. I'm here really in two capacities. One is for the running club. We have been using that track now for years. We're hoping to continue using it. We are always respectful. If any of the sports teams are on it, we don't use the track. There was some confusion over whether or not we could use it while the band was on the field. It's been cleared up. We will not do that. But we're hoping to be able to continue using the track without paying exorbitant rental fees. I will say that we do not require membership fees, and we don't charge for any of our group runs. We're just a community running group that uses the track. When we do have events where we charge, we have paid rental fees to the school. We've rented the track a couple times, and we also rent the parking lots when we put on our Blobfest run. Also, I'm here just representing the runners of Phoenixville. We had a question a little bit earlier about why there are so many people here. In fact, we've got a number of runners who are joining us tonight. And the runners of Phoenixville would also like to be able to continue to use the track. I would like to propose a key card or key system where the track locks when we leave it. That way we can go in, you guys know who's there because we can swipe it, you can register who's there. We as a group could also maintain insurance. We already do, it's on file with the district. I think that would solve a number of the issues that have arisen. Also want to just point out that I know there's been some issues of vandalism at the track lately. Obviously that's not runners. If there were runners at the track, I highly doubt that the vandalism would have occurred. I want to point out a couple of the local surrounding school districts, what they do for access to their track. Pottsgrove, Plymouth, White Marsh, Downingtown, Soudertown and Quakertown, Henderson, and Bethlehem all are either free or at most $15 for a key card that allows access to the track. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. There are no more speakers, so with that, come on up. just say your name and.
Yeah, my name is Jinu Daniel. I'm a parent of Zachary Daniel, 5th grade in middle school, and 2nd grade, Jacqueline Daniel. I came here to report one of my concern recently, which happened in October 8th in our tennis courts. So me and my son, who is a tennis player, we came into practice. As usual, we used our court for the last 5-6 years for the longest time. So our court is in demand because of the lighting we have. So compared to all other facilities we have, there is no lights being provided, and it's getting dark recently. So what we have seen recently is more people from neighboring area come over and they start reserving the court, even though they are not using the court, playing in the court. So when we walked it, we saw one of the courts being used by 4 players. They are playing the second and the third court with the lights. It was free. So we always prefer to stay in one side of the court where the fence is, because we have a bucket of balls so it doesn't fall over everywhere. So when we came in, there was like a puddle of water in there. I have a dirty towel to clean up, and my son started cleaning up, and we saw the puddle on the other side too. So then we thought, like, let's move to the middle court. When I walked in, so 2 of those gentlemen from the other court who were playing, they just came out saying that this is reserved, we are using it. So I said it's a public court. I walked in first, and they didn't listen to me, and they started playing while I was in the court in the middle. So they were intentionally hitting harder back and forth when I was there, and one of the ball came to me. I had to block it with my hand, and I called 911. The cops came in, and since there is no crime happened, they de-escalated the situation by asking me to go to the other court or go to the Fisher Park court. That's what happened. So I just want to make sure that this is happening. We have our own players, like kids who is in our school district, trying to use the facility, but which has been taken over by adults outside our community. So my humble request to the school board is, like, can we have a written guidelines more specific, saying that if the court is busy, can we have like 1 hour of time limit when people are waiting, or so they were saying that they put the bag in the middle of the court, like in between 2 courts. So that's not a mode of reservation. We don't have a reservation. They are making their own rules, right? And also, can our students get some kind of priority in terms of using the facility within the school than the rest of the people? So we have like great players like Jared in the high school. They are great hitters. I have seen them waiting for them to get out of the court so that they can come in and hit. It was a bad
15
experience.
seconds.
Bad experience for me and my son. He was waiting there. He was a bit scared having this to go on, like cops talking to me. But again, I feel like it's I was asked to move out of the court, then they continued to play. And the message given was kind of bad, that you can take over the court and no one is going to do anything about it. I request you to consider this like seriously and do something about it. Thank you.
I really appreciate your comments. I'm sorry that happened. Can I ask you to come up after the meeting's over to sign this, just so I have your name on there?
Can I chime in real quick? Just in the interest, since we have, I know, a couple emails that have come through. Do we have plans to sort of maybe talk about this topic?
It's on the main meeting agenda tonight.
Okay, good. Thank you.
There you go. All right. Well, with that, unless there's anything else anyone has, I will call this meeting adjourned. Our next meeting is, when is our next meeting? 10 November, 2025. So with that, I will call this meeting adjourned at 6:47.